All right, well, thank you all for coming. I'm here to present the findings of the first part of our audit of St. Louis Public Schools. This report includes a detailed look at the budgetary, hiring, and procurement practices of the district. As you all know, we began this process in August of last year, and over the last several months, my audit staff has worked quickly and diligently to thoroughly assess this school district that oversees the educational well-being of more than 16,000 young people and pays the salaries of more than 3,500 full and part-time employees. As you can imagine, it's an incredible amount of work looking at all aspects of a district of this size. It's one of the largest districts in the state. And while we continue to review this school system, I wanted to get the information that we do have into the hands of parents and taxpayers as soon as possible, which is why we're here today to present the first of two parts of our audit. When I announced this audit nearly 1 year ago today, I made it clear that this was an audit that was on my radar before city and state officials began calling on us to get involved. Even before I started my service as state auditor, I believed parents and taxpayers deserved more information about how their schools are performing. And once the people of Missouri trusted me with the responsibility of this position, I made it a priority to emphasize audits of our public schools. At the state level, school funding is the second largest part of our budget. And at the local level, it's number one. I know the community, and to some extent the entire state, are counting on the leadership of St. Louis Public Schools to do their job. I know the public outcry, the call from other government officials, and even the reporting by members of the media initially focused on issues surrounding the former superintendent, Dr. Keisha Scarlett. But I want to stress that the district was in desperate need of a performance audit well before Dr. Scarlett arrived in St. Louis. There certainly were many issues related to Dr. Scarlett's tenure, and they are documented in this report. However, the school board was asleep at the wheel and allowed Dr. Scarlett to abuse the system in the first place, and that issue has to be addressed. When you read through the report we've drafted, you'll find a recurring theme, and one that should cause concern for anyone who cares about the future of St. Louis Public Schools. Time and time again, you'll see that the Board of Education can and must do better, a much better job of providing leadership and oversight for the district. These problems exist in the essential functions of the budget process, where it's been well documented that the district is on a path to bankruptcy. For fiscal years 2024, 2025, and 2026, the district budgeted deficit spending of $17.7 million, $35.4 million, and $33.4 million, respectively. As of last year, the district had an unassigned fund balance of approximately $200 million in its general fund. But based on the district's current projected spending, that fund will be down to just under $136 million by 2026. And if this trend continues, the district will be what the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education defines as a financially stressed district by 2030, and will not have sufficient funds to complete the school year by 2031. There's still time to avert that disaster, but as our report also identifies, the kind of planning that needs to take place to ensure the long-term financial future of the district simply has not happened. We found instances where the board has abdicated its oversight authority. For fiscal year 2025, the preliminary budget authorizing over $440 million of expenditures wasn't received by the board until May 28, 2024, and was then approved in just 14 days. Then the board revised its own policy, which previously required the preliminary budget to be presented in March, so that it wasn't due until June 1st, which is only 30 days before the start of the fiscal year. Rather than complete the assignment, they changed the due date. That's not something that should work for a student in the classroom, and it's certainly not something that should work for district leadership. To top it off, the budget books they were using had numerous errors and information that was out of date or completely inaccessible to the public. Our report also documents the questionable and unreasonable purchases made by district personnel for items that did not have an educational benefit. The district made approximately $1.4 million in purchases using 24 purchasing cards from June 6, 2023 through August 5th, 2024, which occurred under the watch of Dr. Scarlett. From that period, we reviewed a sample of 27 transactions totaling $17,040, and we found 17 of the transactions, or 63% of them, totaling $12,436 that were questionable or unreasonable. We identified credit card purchases such as $3,888 in charges for a Topgolf venue rental, $1,689 for a 4-night stay at Caesars Palace, and $1,282 for a mystery Airbnb rental charged to the district-issued credit card for the former superintendent that nobody can explain. To make matters worse, the district had no supporting documentation that even attempted to justify these purchases. This likely occurred because the district had no policy at all on the acceptable use of purchasing cards until July of 2024. I'm sure we can all agree some of those purchases don't pass the common sense test and should never have happened, but the school board's decision to allow credit cards to be handed out to employees like Halloween candy without any kind of guidance on their acceptable use is inexcusable. It's even more egregious when you consider that the 24 purchasing cards we reviewed had a total credit limit of $892,000 that could have been used at any time. The audit also found the district overpaid the former superintendent by $3,258 when reimbursing her for moving expenses, and that's if you accept the logic that the district was required to pay her an additional $13,000 to cover her tax on that income. It also reimbursed the interim deputy chief of operations $15,000 in moving expenses, even though there was no employment contract or agreement that required or even allowed for the reimbursement of those expenses. Again, the common thread here is a lack of leadership. The superintendent of a school is a very important job, but the board is in charge of the district, and the board hires the superintendent. We also see a significant vulnerability to potential fraud in the district's procurement procedures. A review of 20 vendors found the district bypassed the required sealed bid process by classifying 3 purchases totaling $266,780 as emergencies or sole source procurements when they were not. In one specific example in the report, the district authorized emergency asphalt repairs at 2 elementary schools. There was no documentation provided as to why this was an emergency. And to add to that, the damaged areas did not appear to be jeopardizing the immediate safety of staff and students, one of the required conditions for the authorization of an emergency purchase. Because the board did not require the vendor to complete the repairs until 146 days after the emergency purchase was approved, which was June 30th, the middle of summer. While that project was only approved for $32,964, it ultimately ended up costing taxpayers $76,980, and the board could provide no explanation for why it ran more than $46,000 over the approved cost. We don't know why this was an emergency procurement, but the facts and the timeline make it appear the emergency designation was solely used to get around normal procurement procedures. This raises a red flag, and it's something the board must do a better job of monitoring in the future. The same can be said for the district selecting a vendor without a competitive process for $133,295 in t-shirt purchases. The district's explanation that the purchases with the t-shirt vendor were multiple purchases less than $5,000 each, which they stated was below the sealed bid threshold, just doesn't hold water. The district has several preferred vendors that provide t-shirts and apparel, and the district was unable to explain why personnel used a vendor that had not competed to become a preferred vendor instead of one that had. Our report also notes for 14 out of 17 vendors reviewed, the district didn't retain supporting documentation, obtain quotes, or board approval, or contracts when required prior to making purchases. Without documentation of the procurement and the selection process, it's not possible to demonstrate compliance with district and board policies, or demonstrate for the public or other interested vendors that the process was not corrupt. Going forward, the board must do a better job of providing adequate oversight for their procurements to ensure the risk of fraud or corruption is minimized. We also found unjustifiable salaries approved by the former superintendent, Dr. Scarlett, and approximately $3.5 million in unconstitutional employee incentive payments. Our report shows that Dr. Scarlett approved cabinet member salaries in excess of the district salary schedule and did so without board approval. She also gave pay raises to cabinet members with no support to justify the increases, some of which were applied retroactively. When we looked at 10 of the cabinet members, we had identified 6 who were offered salaries higher than they should have been by the former superintendent without board approval. The salaries exceeded the maximum allowed by amounts ranging from $12,478 to $44,039. Additionally, a review of 30 employees' annual salaries found that 22, or 73% of those, did not agree with the board-approved salary schedules. And this was a random sampling. Of the 22 employees, 21 exceeded the salary schedule by $1,446 to $45,189. These were decisions made by Dr. Scarlett, but it cannot be overlooked that the board stood idly by and failed to live up to its responsibility to provide oversight to ensure these salary adjustments were reasonable and necessary. The board should not only be aware of the salaries of key cabinet members and of their own policies, but are also responsible for setting and approving all salaries for district employees, which clearly was not happening. Board policy is very clear that the board must review the compensation plan recommended by the superintendent annually, and the pay rates for all employees have to be approved by the board every single year. While Dr. Scarlett may be gone, the board still has a great deal of improvement to make in regard to its level of involvement and oversight of employee salaries. These are not all the findings contained in the report, but they represent some of the most serious issues that need to be addressed immediately. And as I'm sure you can tell from my comments thus far, the district has a lot of work to do to right the ship. While the responses provided by the school board to our report indicate they're very committed to putting our recommendations into place, I'm disappointed that the leaders of this school district in place during the audit period didn't already have that level of commitment to giving the thousands of young people who attend school here the kind of educational environment they need to excel academically. This district needs leadership, and without it, we see a school system headed for bankruptcy, a school system that lacks the vision needed to navigate towards better outcomes, and one that fosters an environment with their credit card use and their procurement procedures that's ripe for fraud, corruption, and the misuse of taxpayer funds. As I said, this report is the first of two that will be released of our audit of St. Louis Public Schools. Our work to document findings and provide recommendations to allow the students of the district to receive the free and appropriate education they're constitutionally entitled to is going to continue, and I look forward to releasing our final report as soon as possible.